just saying to them this morning, I'm so grateful for Instagram because I have always followed Dolly and I learned so much from her. And thanks to her, I started following Kirsten. And it's not easy being a parent today. So we're so grateful for the resources that they provide to anyone who wants them. And thank you so much for coming today to talk to all of us. And I know we're all going to learn a lot because I'm sure I make all the mistakes that you're going to mention. So thank you and welcome. And we're going to pass around a sign-up sheet too, because we have events like this all the time at the store. And I know a lot of you are new to the store. So sign up and come back. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Samantha. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. It's so fun to see so many familiar faces. I'm Dr. Dolly Klock. I'm a family medicine physician. I run a business called Adolescents. That's how I know many of you, where I do work with parents and teens and tweens around puberty and sexual development, but so much more than that. Lots of parent coaching around parenting in the digital age and mental health in our kids, party culture, and so much more. And of course, sports, athletics is something that comes up all the time. A lot when I'm talking about mental health, stories come up that involve experiences in athletics. And so that's sort of how we connected years ago. And so I'll let you introduce yourself.
I'm Kirsten Jones. I'm a peak performance and sports parenting coach. I have the podcast #Raising Athletes with Susie Walton. If you haven't checked that out, highly recommend that. She's a family coach as well, and also has raised 4 of her own amazing athletes and 9 grandkids. Bill Walton's former wife and now Luke's mom, and raised amazing kids. So I get to parent with, or to coach with her, and we bring on athletes and authors and sports people. And now I'm bringing on a lot of current athletes, like college athletes, so that our younger athletes can hear from them. What does it take to get to that next level? And then I've been working on this book for about 7 years. So it's been one of those labors of love that I've just had this mission that as I was a volleyball player, I played basketball and volleyball in high school. I played volleyball in college and then moved overseas with my East Asian Studies degree to Eastern Europe. So my parents were thrilled about that, and then found Nike. They had an office in Vienna, Austria. I started in Budapest, Hungary, and then ended up in Vienna and joined Nike there, and had a 15-year career with Nike in Vienna, Stockholm, Amsterdam, and ultimately world headquarters. And my favorite job at Nike, ultimately I ended up in the HR group in global footwear, and I ran a program called Product Creation University, which was how do we do everything that we want to do as an athlete: compete, collaborate, ideate, storytell, all of those great things. And it was while I was doing that I was like, oh, I love helping people figure out what's getting in their way, what's holding them back, and releasing it. And so now I work with parents and their athletes one-on-one, and then work with teams as they go through their seasons to help them figure out what's getting in their way. So much of what we have that's holding us back is between our ears, right? And so this book is I believe we teach what we need to learn. So I'm a mother of 3. I have 23, 20 as of last week, and 17-year-old, 2 boys that play basketball, D1 basketball. Now my oldest just graduated, and he's going to play D3 basketball since he has a few more years left, and a daughter who's a high school volleyball player. So I'm in the trenches. This book is written from the perspective of, I haven't figured it all out. I'm going through it too. And I pretty much lived every single thing in this book, as much as I don't have to experience. Oh, yes, you do, Kirsten. You need to go through every single one of these experiences. So it'd be fun. I thought it'd be fun. Dolly and we have great rapport just getting to speak together. So to talk about some of those things that I know you're all going through as well.
So we're good. The plan for the morning is I'm going to interview Kirsten so we can start some of these conversations, but we want to make sure there's plenty of time for all of you to ask your own questions as well. And I just want to quickly acknowledge, because some of us were chatting before, that this has been emotionally a very difficult week for a lot of people. And so we're just so grateful that you took time out to be here, and hopefully this can be a little distraction for now, but I just want to acknowledge that. So you obviously have had so many experiences to draw on for this book, but what was the true inspiration for you to write It's amazing.
Yeah, Samantha, as if on cue, when I met her, she was like, "Well, it wasn't this way when we were growing up," and that's exactly the case, right? We grew up. Most of us probably grew up in the 70s and 80s. You know, you played whatever sport was in front of you at the moment. You never worried about what team you were going to be on or what level you were going to play. My parents could have cared less if I ever played in college. There was no club sports, right? It was just you went and you played outside until the lights went out, or the bell rang, or mom, told you to come home for dinner. And the research that I did in the beginning of the book is what talks about the setup to how did this happen, right? How did we get here to this point where it's a $20 billion business? It's larger than the NFL, right? This is something that we're all so deeply invested in. In the 40s and 50s, about 24% of women worked outside of the home. By the 70s and 80s, that number had doubled. So now you have twice the amount of money, but where are mom and dad right after school, right? So the kids are going outside to play. In 1979, Adam Walsh gets abducted and killed. And 38 million people, long before DVD or DVR or any of that, tune in to watch this atrocity. So all of a sudden we start thinking, wow, the world is not such a safe place. Even though that really was an anomaly, it became this, it's not safe for our kids to just go play outside. At the same time, academically, we're falling behind. America shows up as we're falling to the bottom of the list. So now all of a sudden, our kids aren't as smart. we have more money, but we don't have as much time. So we start investing in youth sports. And again, I don't think there was any like one moment this happened, but simultaneously, ESPN comes online, 1979. So now you can turn on your TV and you can see Tiger Woods or Nadia Comaneci or any of these young aspiring athletes where you're like, oh, wow. And the 10,000 hour rule comes along where, wow, if I spend this much time helping can I too create a prodigy? So dads who are well-meaning, mostly dads, it's, not many moms, but mostly dads sign up to coach. Say, okay, I can take over. I'll leave the office early. And that's where it kind of started. Late 80s. Well, actually, I was late 80s. So early 90s even, now into the 2000s. And even in the last 15 years, the athletes that I have on the podcast and I've interviewed have said, even I've seen such a huge spike. I think in the last even 10 years, everything's gotten super dialed up to the point where, I coach with Kristen Keefe here, and we have parents of 9 and 10-year-olds who come up and apologize to us to say, I'm so sorry, we're too far behind. I know my daughter hasn't started volleyball yet, and she's never going to make it, right? She's 9. No, play everything. Play as many things as you can. Do not specialize early, which I know we'll get into, but it is so sad that we're now in a situation where they're feeling the pressure, we're feeling the pressure as parents, and then we're passing it on to them that they have to have figured it out by 9 or 10 what they want to do with the rest of their lives. No, that's not the way this works.
Okay, I already see this resonate. I'm seeing the people nodding, right? So let me just ask all of you. So how many of you were athletes when you were a kid? How many of you played sports as a kid? How many of you were still playing sports in high school? And those of you who played in high school, were you playing for your high school, or how many of you also played club? Much fewer, very few, right? Yeah. And so how many of you have kids who are playing sports? All right. And how many of you feel like sports today is very different than what you experienced growing up, right? Like everybody. So I think, we all can agree with that. And this is where your book is so helpful to just sort of help us all sort through it. And to me, this is what I really appreciate is that this is one piece of a broader conversation that's going on right now about toxic achievement culture. And Kirsten's kind enough to let me plug another book, parenting book that I think is so excellent, which some of you may have heard of, which is called Never Enough by Jennifer Wallace. It's excellent. And it is literally about this. And she goes a little bit into sports parenting as well. Mm-hmm. And of course you go much deeper because that's the emphasis of your whole book. So help us think through this. Like, when parents are feeling like sports are so crazy, like what is it that we should be focusing, and how can we make our kids feel like they're enough as they are, like they don't have to get all the trophies, and it's okay if they don't make the top tier team for their club, and help us think through this.
Yeah, it used to be the pro athletes that worried about this, and then it was the college athletes. And now, like we said, it's trickled down to where, he's 8, you're not going to Sweden this summer. Like, you're behind, like you don't have that private coach. Well, so-and-so has the private coach. And did you see what they're doing? Because I saw their story, we talk about at 13 and under, focus on 3 things: friends, fun, and fundamentals. When you are looking for a club, when you're looking for a coach, when you're looking for a program, what I am looking for is somebody who wants to invest in my child as a human, not as an asset to help them win the trophy. It was a quote I saw just a couple of days ago that I love. And I believe the biggest measurement youth sports coaches should have about their success is not about whether they win the title, but how many kids sign up the next year. And I have my middle son played both basketball and soccer for as long as he could, and he loved both, passionate. He had one coach that stepped on his neck from the second that he took that field because he didn't think he was enough. And by the end of the season, the last tournament we pulled up to, I might never forget it. He was 9 years old. We pull up to the field and he's sobbing before the game has even started. And he said, "Please don't make me get out of the car." And I thought, what am I doing to my child, right? Like, this is supposed to be fun. This is supposed to be, it may have been the swearing at the players, swearing at the other coach, swearing at the ref because of, what his expectations were. And I never forget, right after the game, Parker got in for the last minute or something. And by that time, he was in the fetal position, he didn't even want to go in, right? And he says, "Well, just so you know, most of you will not be invited back because we are the top club here. We are not going to be, you slackers." I was like, yeah, I said with love and kindness, we will not be coming back, But the sadness for me is he has never touched a soccer ball since. Like, that literally crushed him. And luckily, he had another sport. So he pivoted to that and played for this coach who thought he hung the moon and allowed him to grow and become who he's meant to be. But friends, fun, and fundamentals. And for parents, I say there's the 4th one that we need to avoid, and that's the FOMO. Stay in your lane. Figure out what's going to work for you. If you want to go on the camping trip this summer for a month and, 10U soccer is not going to allow that, have a great trip, right? And I get it. It's hard because you see this kid doing really well and that parent's talking about it and they're posting about it and you feel that pressure. And the kids, and I've got parents will ask, "Well, yeah, but my kid's that kid who wants to go to everything. He doesn't want to miss anything." I've had that kid too. He sat in the back of the raft as we rafted the Yellowstone like this, right? When I asked him, he's now 23. When I asked him, "What did you think of that trip?" He's like, "Oh, it was great. I don't remember why." I was like, "Because you were like this the entire time." And he's like, "No, I wasn't." "Yes, you were." So that's where I believe the parenting piece needs to come in. And we need to say, "Gosh, these are the parameters. I love that you're passionate about this." Eventually, as my husband says for basketball, you can't teach height. Like, eventually genetics will catch up with you. If you are meant to play at that next level, that now was less than 7% would play D1, D2, D3, NAIA pre-COVID. Now with the transfer portal, where familiar with it, but the NC2A has said you don't have to sit out. You can just go from school to school to school. Now you have a lot of coaches saying, "I'm not even recruiting high school athletes. Why would I recruit high school athletes? I can go into the portal and I can get you, but with 3 years of experience and stats, and I don't have to deal with, the little snot-nosed 18-year-old who doesn't know what he wants," right? So getting even to college is becoming less and less accessible for our kids.
Yeah. So one of my, you brought up this story. It really gets to me about the coach, and and I think sometimes I hear from parents are worried about coaches with those kind of attitudes, but I think we also have to acknowledge the parents' role in all of this as well. And you say in your book, 7 in 10 kids drop out of sports by age 13, largely because the adults, the parents and the coaches, are sucking the fun out of it, right? And so help us sort of think through, you have a chapter called the Mindset Toolbox, and you even say in your book that if you're only going to read one chapter, this is the one to read, and you go through the 4 C's. And I thought maybe since it's so important to you, let's talk through that. So I think the first one was clarity.
Yeah. So when I meet with athletes one-on-one or even with the team, I think the biggest thing to do is I believe sports is a metaphor. Like this, everybody's going to pivot at some point. You're not going to be playing sports, but you're going to take the life lessons that you learn through team, or even if you're an individual athlete, and that's what you're going to apply. So I love helping them. If you just think now, if somebody handed you this toolkit that, okay, you're going to stop playing tennis in 10 years, but here's this toolbox that you're going to use for your first job, for your first relationship, for your third relationship, for your 5th boss, like those kind of your friendships, like those, that's what I believe is the real gift. So clarity is around getting clear on goals. And I know that's a contentious word because some people are like, I don't like goal setting, or it doesn't really resonate with me, or, but when I say goal, and I mean it in a very short-term way. So if you have an 8-year-old who is loving Taekwondo right now, that's the little window that we're looking at. I'm not talking about, yes, Greta Thunberg at age 14 decided she was going to change the culture of how we think about the planet. Like nobody came to Greta Thunberg in Sweden and said, you seem wise, you're going to change the world, right? Mm-hmm. But some people are born like that have that vision. There's a great book called The Art of Impossible by Stephen Kotler, and he talks about that's what we call your high, hard goals, like massively transformative purpose. So some people have those. Most of us don't. I mean, my dad was a doctor. He said he knew he wanted to be a doctor at 12. I'm like, so jealous. Like I never had that, but along the way, I was curious, and I liked basketball, and then I liked volleyball, and then I really wanted to work. Oh, if I could talk to athletes all day, then I'm going to work for Nike. Most of us are wayfinding. So getting clear and helping them get clear. And again, that's what I'll work with athletes on, is even like, okay, what does the next year look like? Or maybe that's too long. What does the next 6 months look like? Because if they have clarity, our kids can relax like we can when we know where the guardrails are. And when you just say, go for it, it's just all a free for all. It's very overwhelming, right? And I had a 10-year-old client, true story, 6th child, which is odd in this. I got on the phone with the mom's like, she used to be a really good gymnast and she can do this triple flip. And now she's diving and she freaks out as soon as she gets to the platform. I don't understand it. And I get on the phone with her, this is during COVID, and she says, I said, what's going on? She goes, I don't know that I'm afraid of it, but I really like gymnastics, but I can't get a gymnastics scholarship. So my mom wants me to figure out how to get a scholarship for college. 10. She doesn't know what she wants for dinner, much less what she wants to do this weekend. And we're expecting her to figure out and have that pressure. And the parents are like, gee, I wonder why she can't do the flip. I have a hint, but that's the pressure that even subconsciously, no parent sets out to screw up their kid. No, of course, we all want to do the best we have from where we are with what we've got. But that's what I hope this book is shining a light on. Ooh, I've had a couple of people say, ooh, that was me. Like, ooh, and I do that. Like, ooh, that was me too. And if we know it, we recognize ourselves in it, then we can make a different choice. And that can set our kids up to react to what we're putting out there for them.
Okay, so I want to come back because, we started this talking about goal setting. And so I because of what you also just said, I can imagine parents, the goal setting was, okay, we're going to focus on these 6 months, but really the ultimate goal is the college scholarship. So how do you recommend parents bring, when I coach parents of adolescents on a variety of topics, once you're talking about especially teenagers, if you don't get buy-in from the kid, like good luck, right? Like they have to buy in too. And so coming together and sort of having a discussion and coming to a consensus together is sort of the way we approach things. So how with sports do you recommend encouraging parents to do that, to
take the college scholarship off the table? There is no discussion about a college scholarship. There shouldn't even be a thought about a college scholarship. I do have the story in there of a kid who played golf. He started at 5. The dad thought he was great. So we go to the driving range. The pro thinks he's great. Next thing he knows, I'm dragging the other 4 kids. We're driving all over the country, going to all these events. Sophomore year, junior year, he hits the lottery. We get the full ride to Stanford. Parenting win, right? We did it right. A couple months before he's going to go to Stanford, he says, I'm not going to Stanford. I'm never playing golf again. You need to keep checking in with them as they go. Yes, that's not always the case. I'm not saying that was bad parenting. He was doing the best he had, but he was the one that, as he was sitting there watching his 5th kid play basketball, he was like, oh, he wasn't the one that was like, all these other parents are getting nuts. And he's like, if that's what he wants, that's fine. But we're going to take it one season at a time, 1 year at a time. Keep asking. I had a client who was a baseball player. At 8, he told his mom he wanted to play for UCLA. At 17, he's like, I just don't want to break her heart. I don't want to play baseball in college. And of course, the mom was like, I'm okay with that. Like, he doesn't feel like you are. There are some messages he's getting from you that he still feels like, because he said this 7 years ago, 8 years ago, that he needs to do that.
I love it. You have a chapter that is literally called Whose Dream Is It? And that's exactly what you're talking about. And I think, to me, that was one of the biggest takeaways from this book, is if every parent of an athlete could just ask themselves that question, at least, at the beginning of every season or the end of every season, and keep coming back to that question and checking in with their kid to make sure, who are you doing this for, really?
And you and I can both relate. Both of our daughters were playing club volleyball, super competitive for many, many years. Your daughter pivoted a year ago. Mine just pivoted. She didn't play her high school season, and she, for the longest time, wouldn't relent. And my husband's like, because she thinks she's going to upset you. And I remember we were up in Spokane at a tournament, and for the 25th time in my mind, I said, you do not need to play. And she's like, really? Like, it was the first time I'd said it to her. I said, no. Just because I play doesn't mean you need to play. You need to do what is you are passionate about. And I'm going to be excited. Well, can I go to the UCLA screenwriting camp? Yeah. Let's look into that, right? So let's figure out what it is they are passionate about. And I know that's a tricky word. Passion comes from building competence. So as I was mentioning about high, hard goals, not everybody's born with a passion, but passion is born from curiosity. So what are they curious about? What are the things that we can research that help them get some passion around a topic?
Yeah. And I think it's hard, especially when kids are playing at a very competitive level. There's not a lot of time to discover your other passions.
Yeah.
Right. And then you end up with an injury or something, or you can't play your sport anymore. And then I see that too, the kids who their entire identity was wrapped up in that one sport. And now they feel unmoored. They're lost. So that's another thing to, like,
and you're filling out the college application and all you have to say is 7 years of volleyball, right? And she's doing that right now. And she's like, what else do I say about who I am, right? So helping them figure out what is important to them, because there's a place for everything. We could talk about the college cheating scandal and how crazy that all is too. But that's what's driving a lot of this, is we're all feeling like our kid needs to go to the name brand school. There's a place for everybody. And it doesn't have to be XYZ University.
All right, I want another one of these C's,
okay,
of these 4 C's, and that is self-care, because that one speaks to me as
care.
well.
So what resonated as we were prepping for this is I was thinking about what's been going on in the world and what we are all feeling. And the stats from her book that you just mentioned, Never Enough. She says really what the children are reading is, I forget, it was like 80% is given off by the mother. And I know was the 2 gentlemen in the back. Thank you for coming. But mostly women, we are dictating our kids' mental health. If we are stressed out and we are, reacting to that stupid teacher and that horrible boss and that, then they are reading our energy. And so it is so important that we are helping ourselves in whatever way that means, whether that's meditation or mindfulness or prayer and community. And that's what I'm loving about this book tour. Is I was just in Montana last weekend, where I grew up, and got to speak in front of 50 people I haven't seen for 35 years. It's about community. It's about us connecting, finding your person when you are in that moment of, oh my gosh, what am I going to do with Johnny? And finding the person you can connect with, and making sure you're putting on your mask first to be able to help your child. And if you can't help your child because you're too close to it, that's when I do think we do need to ask for help. And there's no shame in that. In fact, I think that's very beneficial for our kids to hear from somebody else who has no skin in the game, who just wants them to be successful. It's always helpful. I like always helping my kids find somebody 2 or 3 years older than them that they're doing what my child thinks they want to do, because that's like, oh, that's aspirational. Oh, he went on to play in college. I'll never forget. My son was a freshman at Loyola, and there was a senior, and he was at the other end of the gym, and my son came home with eyes like this. He's like, you're never going to believe it. The senior came over to shoot with me, right? I was like, I called his mom, like, this is the coolest thing ever, right? It takes so little to make an impact on others. And we can do that, and we can help our kids do that by us modeling it.
Our ability as parents to regulate our own emotions. I mean, to me, that is like one of the number one skills in parenting that is so hard, because when you see your kid is struggling, right? If they're acting anxious or whatever, it is a true physiologic response. It's your mama bear, papa bear response. These are hormones. It's a whole hormone cascade that's, activating your fight or flight response, right? As if you were running away from a bear, even though it's not a bear. It's because the coach, benched your kid instead, right? And so and then if our kids are struggling, they're having that same response, and now we're like spiraling with them, right? So this applies to so much more than just athletics, but learning how to find the calm in that moment, even if that means like taking a little break for the moment, saying, I want to talk about this, but not right now, because, talking about difficult things when you're dysregulated is not the best, right? I just think I'm glad you made that point, because that's so important. And the community piece too, because this is how we have to be able to talk about all of this. And so finding your peer group, like, who are your people? You don't have to have a whole bunch of them, but you need 1 or 2 other adults to process with, so you're not unloading on your kid, when something's upsetting you at the tournament or whatnot. Like, talk with these other parents to find the calm ones, not the ones that are also spiraling.
This might come up, but the only 6 words our kids need to hear us say: I love to watch you play. Not that coach was an idiot, or I can't believe he didn't pass you the ball, or any of that. Let the car ride home be joyous, and be, usually by the time you've made it to the ice cream store, they've moved on. Oh no, we're like perseverating on it. Like, oh, I'm going to teach them, I've had to get out and walk a few blocks. Like, just take yourself out of it, because you're not helping the situation if you're adding fuel to their fire. And I've actually had parents call and like, well, she's really miserable. She's on the bench. And then I'll get on the phone with a 13-year-old, like, so how's it going? It's great. I'm on the team. I got the uniform. You should see my hair tie. It's awesome. Okay, great. All right. Well, you sound really good. Let me get your mom back on the phone.
Thank goodness those kids have you. Okay, I want to talk about a couple of health-related things, because that's my jam.
Let's do it.
Okay, so sleep. I want to talk about sleep because I have a captive audience, and our kids are not getting enough sleep, particularly our teenagers, right? So just so you all know, if you have elementary schoolers, preteens, the recommendation is 9 to 12 hours a night of sleep. If you have teenagers, recommendations 8 to 10 hours. All of us in this room should be getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep, right? This is important for our immune system, our metabolism, our mood regulation, our learning, our athletic performance, our creativity, you name it. Sleep is so important. And I know there's, so much discussion of adolescent mental health and how poor it is right now. And, we're in a mental health crisis with our kids. And to me, sleep is like the number one thing we should be looking at, because if you're not getting enough sleep, you're not going to be mentally healthy. And what concerns me is that I see which we're not going to fix today in this room, but again, to me, it's part of this bigger toxic achievement culture, is there are so many systems in place that erode our kids' ability to do something as simple as get enough sleep, like super early morning practices, or practices that are going till 9 or 10 o'clock at night, right? And now the kid has to get up at 6 a.m. So that's a bigger question, but what have you found in your research about sleep and athletic performance?
Yeah, so it's a superpower, right? And you can study any of the professional athletes. There's a very famous study that was done at Stanford maybe 15 years ago now, but they work with the basketball team. Their ability to just shoot free throws went up 10%. And if you're looking at just when they went from 6 hours to 8 hours, and like you think about that, it's like who doesn't want to make 10% more of their shots just by doing one simple thing? My oldest son was at Boston University, and they gave everybody Whoop bands. That's a thing that'll track your sleep, which is really cool. And he said it became competitive among the team to see who got the sleep. I was like, oh, I love that. Mm-hmm. We need more of that. Like, it should be more, because I feel like it's the opposite right now. The kids are like, I mean, we spoke a couple of years ago at a private school, and one of the dads kind of came up bragging that his daughter was living on Red Bull and, only had 3 hours of sleep. And now she's in college and she wants to be pre-med, and she really only does. And I was just like, wow. And my own personal experience was my daughter was playing high school, and she decided not to this year. And they have 5:30 a.m. practice. And a couple of weeks ago, she came downstairs, and, normally it's like, like you don't barely get a grunt out of her. She came down, she was like, my skin looks great today. I was like, who are you? That's my kid who has enough sleep, right? So when you start to see them getting into that, don't talk to me, there's usually an underlying cause. And I know it's hard. Like you said, we can't necessarily solve it. Tell the coaches that, but figuring out ways to help them prioritize that, whether it's getting devices out of the room, which I know is very hard, but finding ways to help them so that they can be their best version of themselves. I mean, forget school, right? Like, we haven't talked about that. Like, how do you perform in school if you've only had 4 or 5 hours of sleep?
Yeah. And they're never going to prioritize it themselves. So that's on us as parents to create some boundaries, some limits there, and sticking to those. Okay, another health-related thing that makes me bananas, and that is early single sport specialization. And so this is something that I already see the heads nodding, right? Where kids are really narrowing in on one sport at a very early age, and often it's almost mandated for them, because if you're going to play, by the time you're middle school, high school, if you want to make the team at certain schools, you need to also be playing club. And oftentimes that translates into a year-round commitment. And we know from research in the medical community that leads to overuse injuries, it leads to burnout, leads to kids leaving sports entirely at a very early age. So I just want you all to know, because I know we have lots of parents and athletes here. This is some guidelines from the American Academy of Pediatrics. This is what the top pediatricians in our country recommend about this. They say the primary focus of sports should be to learn lifelong physical activity skills and to have fun, play a variety of sports, right? Because that decreases injuries, what I just said. Delay specialization until late adolescence. Anyone know when late adolescence is? That's age 18 to 21 and beyond, right? Like that, like in this community, if you waited to 18 to like specialize in forget it, right? So, but this is the medical recommendation. Recovery, taking 1 month off from a sport at least 3 times a year to allow for physical and psychological recovery. For injury prevention, at least 1 to 2 days off per week from a sport to decrease the chance of injuries. And then they go on to talk about the importance of diversifying, of playing multiple sports. So what is your experience in working in athletes? Like, what are the benefits of being a multi-sport athlete? What do you think about this sort of culture of early single sport specialization?
In the 1970s, Tommy John was the first pitcher to ever, in fact, they named the surgery after him because he had made so many pitches that they created the surgery to fix his elbow. Now there are specialist doctors who specialize in Tommy John surgery for adolescents, right? We're doing pitch counts. We're making sure they're not getting too many throws in. It's happening at a younger and younger age. And what we know, not only injury, but as we talked about earlier, like whether they even like the sport in 5 years from now. When you think about it, and at 15, if you've been doing the the job for 15 years. By the time you graduate high school, like you've already had a career, right? So keeping them playing multiple sports also for their body. I mean, what I notice when I'm coaching the little girls is you say, okay, throw the ball. And they go like this. And you're like, no, throw the ball. They don't know how to throw a ball because they haven't had, everything now is organized sports, and you sign up for the lesson and you don't go in the street and just play football with your brother. Like you're not learning. But the best athletes, I think a couple of years ago, the statistic from Ohio State was 80% of the football players had played multiple sports all their lives, right? So the best athletes, we can train you how to hit the volleyball. We can train you how to hit the baseball. We can't train athleticism, not to mention burnout. I know there's another level of trying to do all of these at a high level, and particularly in a place like Los Angeles. Our family lived in Buffalo for 3 years. My middle son, his best friend, played basketball, volleyball, and baseball all the way through high school. Just not club, just played the school seasons. He went to community college for baseball. He just got drafted by the Rangers, right? So it happens. It can happen. And then the question is he still having fun? Yes, he's having a blast, But even we see athletes who've made it to the top level, and it is a grind. I mean, they own you 40 hours a week. My son, who just finished playing D1, is playing D3, and he goes, I'm like scratching. He goes, I don't get the ball that much because we only get to practice 3 days a week. He goes, I realize how much I can actually fall in love with the sport again, because when you're playing it every single day. So, I mean, of course they say take a month off. As you're leaving, we were leaving Chicago from the national champion, the Junior Olympics this year. The texts were flying in the airport about tryouts for next year, right? Like, really? We can't wait till Monday? So there is no rest as they start to get older, and it's a problem. It's a problem for a lot of reasons, and it's a problem for us as a family because, we're not seeing our grandparents. We're not, 1 year we made that horrible mistake. We took Thanksgiving off, and my son didn't play for 2 weeks. And that's crazy, right? Coach is saying, I'm going to punish you because you weren't here for one practice. Okay, pick your battles.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, I want to wrap up our conversation so we can get to Q&A, but just sort of in closing, since the title is Raising Empowered Athletes,
Yes.
What define that for us? What does that look like, an empowered athlete?
We moved to Los Angeles in 2015. And I'd been here once or twice when I was playing in college, but didn't know a soul. My husband was working at the time. His business was in Phoenix, so he wasn't here. I had 3 kids, one in high school, one in middle school, one in grade school, no buses. I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to get through the day, mostly in my car. And I pull up to to drop my middle schooler off, and the line to get to the school is a mile long, and I'm just sweating because I also have to get to the grade school too. And I'm like, how am I going to do this? Yeah. And I'm like saying to myself, just worry, just hang on 1 second. And I finally feel this little tap on my shoulder. I'm like, okay, just hang on. He goes, Mom, I got this. And before I can even say anything, he jumps out of the car in LA. We just got here. Don't know. The school's that way, son. Doesn't have a phone. That's empowered, right? That he felt I'm okay. By the time I pulled up to the curb, some guy goes, oh, you just moved here from New York? No problem. I got him. That's what I believe all parents want to know. All of us as humans want to know we are enough. We want to be seen for who we are, no matter whether we're the best player or whether we're the last one on the roster. And raising an empowered athlete means I'm going to jump out of the car and go figure it out. I'm going to move cross country and I'm going to figure it out when I get a concussion, when I don't play, when I get cut, when life happens. That's what we're working with. We want our kids to understand that agency that they have within them. And if they feel that, they're going to be okay. Because not if, but when the wind blows, when it storms, when the tornadoes come, they will. But we will also be that tree, that grounded, that root place, that soft place for them to be and come home to if we can, model that and be grounded in who we are.
Thank you so much. This is just such it's a fun read too, because there's so many stories in here. So we hope if you haven't already gotten this book, please check it out. We're going to open to questions. I'm just going to pass around. Kirsten and I also have a sign-in list if anybody wants to be on our mailing list for, discussions or events or things like that. But with that,
Sorry?
Yeah, that's for Zibby's.
Okay.
I just don't want to assume that if you're interested in Zibby's that you're interested in us.
And if you already have a book, I'll sign it too. You didn't have to buy it today. If you brought your book, I'll sign it too, or buy one today and give it to a coach or a friend or a parent. Let you know.
What's going on in people's minds? Any questions? Yes, in the back.
I'm sorry to ask a personal question. Hopefully other people have a takeaway from this. But my younger son is 10. He's tried and played lots of different team sports. He doesn't love any of them. I think he's athletically inclined, so I think he has the ability to do it, but he just doesn't love them. So I'm trying to struggle with, do I make him do it? And maybe if he doesn't, build that confidence, he'll enjoy it more. And I think there's value in playing sports, all the things that we talked about. Kind of how do I encourage or try to find that thing that's going to click with him or, just make him enjoy it more?
Is he competitive or is he social? Or both?
Not so competitive.
Okay.
More social.
Because I think that's also a thing to evaluate. Not every kid wants to, be winning. And, there's some kids that come out of the womb that way where they're really competitive. And other kids just, again, want to be a part of the community. So, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? So allowing him to, if he's happy, having fun with his friends and, we're playing soccer and he doesn't get that much playing time, that's okay. I had a woman reach out yesterday and her son's a fencer. She lives in the Bay Area. And she's like, I'm just everybody's really intense. And she said, I don't know that he's that good. She goes, in fact, he's not that good. Should I be supporting him? And I was like, yes. If he's having, she goes, but he wears his uniform and he's so proud that he's on the fencing team. Awesome. Right. And if he's not resonating with all of those, let's do a research project. That's what I say. This is a family research project. Maybe it's climbing. Maybe it's, whatever. It doesn't have to, surfing. Maybe it's skateboarding. It doesn't have to be something that, again, there's a trophy associated with it. What we want them to do, as she mentioned, 70% of kids now are dropping out of sports altogether by age 13. And what we know is the data shows if you're not still active as an adult by 23, your rates for obesity, depression, anxiety, all triple, right? So this is not about the trophy. This is not about the scholarship. This is about having them find something that they like to do so that they continue they have a way to self-soothe, to self-care, to keep playing. Great question.
I'm going to tack onto this just for you because I have two kids. One's now 20, one's almost 17. My son was not an athlete. My daughter was and is, and he, the boy, we exposed him to all sorts of things just like you're doing. And for him, it ended up being, he just didn't like organized sports. He didn't want to go, he loved tennis, but he didn't want to go to a 2-hour practice or be at a tournament all day long. And it was really hard for my husband and I, when he was around 7th grade and he was sort of like, I'm done. And we were like, okay, but what are you going to be doing? Right. Because we were so worried about the physical activity piece of it. And also, what else are you going to be doing? But he needed to step out of it to be able to find those other interests. And for him, the other interests were music and theater and art and those types of things. And then he eventually found, he loves to go on runs now. He goes running on his own. He loves to ski. He loved other more individual ways of being active. So I think we also have to make space for that. And I think that's sometimes hard to do in this culture where there is a lot of sort of social currency that comes from athletics.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
I mean, I don't even know if this is a question or a statement, but I'm confused by the club sport system that has kids at practice at 11 o'clock at night. Like my daughter did club volleyball for a year, and then I looked at the practices for the next year, and it was for 7th grade, and it was 7 to 9. And now I'm like, okay, maybe she could be out till 8:30, but I'm confused I just don't understand like how it's legal, honestly, to have practices with teenagers till 10:30 at night. Like, I don't get it. I'm really baffled by it, and it's like, how are people? Everyone like is afraid to step out of it.
Yeah.
But I'm confused about like how could we change it? How could our community be more vocal about that not working? Like, it doesn't seem fair to kids because they want to play sports and they love their sports, and everyone says my kid wants to do this. But it's like my daughter has friends that come home at 11 o'clock at night. That's very common.
Yeah.
And that's the way it's set up. Like, you don't want to pull your kid. I don't know. What's the answer?
I think that's
I don't understand.
and we share your overwhelm and frustration, and it's combined with the pay to play culture, right? So we're also having a lot of kids that don't have access to any sport.
Well, that's a whole other
Well,
question.
they're kind of intertwined because you're setting up this club system so the club systems can succeed, and these kids who just want to play but they don't have opportunity to, that's what's really unrooting the whole thing. And so it's finding out ways. I was able to attend a LA 28 meeting with the organizers here, and she talked about we're pushing a bunch of money into rec sports because that's what we need to bring back,
I wish
right?
we had them for older kids.
And that's what we're not seeing. Those are dying. And so these kids are not having a chance. We lived in Buffalo. The second graders, the 8-year-olds got on the ice at midnight.
I've heard that. 10 o'clock at night practice.
Midnight. Who is allowing their 8-year-old to get on the ice and practice and then go to school the next day? It's nuts.
Yeah, so I think part of this is part of the rationale on the other side is logistical, right? And it's like court time, ice time, whatever, right? So there's a limited number of spaces. However, I feel like there are more spaces than are being utilized. And I honestly feel like, I mean, that Jennifer Wallace book lit a fire under my butt because I feel like we as parents need to start some sort of a revolution. Like, we can't wait for the colleges to change so that the high schools change, so the elementary school, right? Like, enough at some point. And especially when we're talking about club sports, and my gosh, any club director who's listening to this is going to just want to send a hitman after me. But, but the reality is we're like paying for the privilege of them ruining our kids' mental health in terms of the mental health or the sleep piece. So I think there is a place for parents who are like passionate about this to organize themselves to some degree and to say like, no, we're not okay with practices going beyond 8 p.m. If you don't have a court, we're paying all this money, you don't have a court for us, find another court so that we can be done at a reasonable time so our kids can get the minimum necessary sleep at least.
Yes.
And rec center, that's a great point. Like, that should go older. Like, in your community, how can you have more voice around that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Who don't want to play this specialized game,
Yes.
find opportunities.
Yes. And that's been the big problem is you just say, well, go play rec then. Well, rec where, right? There is no rec, right? Yeah, for soccer. But like other sports, I know that some kids want to play basketball. At 15, there was nobody that would play because if you're anybody, you're going to go play club. You know, no. Yeah.
I mean, tacking on, I do have a kid that came home at like 45 last night. And part of it is just the logistics of the field. And, the school sports go to 5, so then the clubs finally get the fields after 5. But, I'm fortunate that like my son loves sports and is good at pretty much all sports he does. So he's got lots of options. What's tough is that he still wants to do it all. And I guess that's where I struggle as a parent in trying to figure out when do I pump those brakes. So I have a kid who's doing club soccer on a very competitive team. They travel, he does practice 3 days a week. And then he wants to do everything for school, for middle school. So right now he's doing flag football. And, I've worked it out where I'm like, okay, you have a tutor this day. So coach, we're just not doing football, for school. I won't tell the club coach, no to practice. But, because I can't. But I guess that's like, where do I pump those brakes? His entire being he was born competitive. I don't say his intrinsic value is from sports, but that's where he has a huge sense of like inner confidence because he's good at it. Where school is a real struggle, and we do have a tutor for him. Like, school is hard, so if I pull sports I'm also going to just squash all of that self-esteem and that confidence. So, but it's really hard to do both. Like he's already talking about, he's like, well, I can do basketball in the winter and I can do but then he's doing club. And at some point, like we've already said, if you want to drop club, it's okay, because he could do sports year round for school, and there's enough diversity there that he could actually make, all the different teams. And I guess it's just when do you pull the plug? Like, is it even achievable to do club in the high school and do a sport for high school?
Would he be happy or fine if you pulled club?
Oh no, he would not. He's
Okay.
uber competitive, and just he's not even like thinking like college or anything like that. I think he recognizes that there's a whole nother level out there, and that he probably would make college, but he wants to be like as competitive as he possibly can be right now.
Yeah, I think it's a resource discussion, right? He only has so many resources. You only have so many resources. He needs sleep. You need sleep. You don't want to live in your car. I mean, so there's multiple facets that are going on that I think, again, keep assessing as you go, and understanding that assume grades are a priority over whether he wins the trophy or not, right? So as long as the grades stay up, but I wouldn't use sports as a penalty or a carrot. Sports are wonderful. We want you to be doing it. We just have to decide resource-wise whether it's going to make sense for you to continue on here or be able to add here. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Kind of along the same lines. Sorry.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
If you have a coach that's your high school coach, but also wants you to do club, and your child's in multiple sports
Athlete,
what do you say to your coach when they're pressuring you to transition into club when you know your child needs a break and you know your child's also going to be moving on to the next sport?
so what have you said?
What's that?
What have you said?
Okay, we're making it very personal.
Were we just speaking theoretically?
Well, I mean, basically I said it's a lot, and for me and for my child, and that we probably will not be joining club because it's logistically almost impossible to do both, and that we will find a way to subsidize training through a coach or creating our own personal group of kids that will practice intermittently throughout. But, it comes back to that coach thinking that they're the center of the universe and that everything goes back to them. So next year at tryouts, I don't want there to be an issue for her going into that because she didn't play along with his world.
Because the coaches at the independent schools they have their own clubs, and then they want you to,
Join
if
their
you want to be on the team, just to be clear what we're talking about, they want you to pay to be in their club or do extra trainings with them.
Yep.
And of course, they decide who gets on the team,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
And so do you have to get all in with that? I think that's what you're talking about, that kind of situation, right?
Yeah.
I'm seeing it more and more.
Yeah, and I had a mom on the phone yesterday who said,
conflict.
we gave up. My daughter had an opportunity to go with a friend to Hawaii for a month, and she said, no, I really want to make the club team. I didn't play, I'm all in. I'm forgoing all of the vacations, and so she went to everything, and then she ended up on the lowest team, and she was like, I was on the third team last year. Now I'm on the lowest. That was when I followed the rules, right? And so the reality of it is, you can't control what the coach is going to do. You only get to decide what makes sense for us. And then, sometimes the cards will fall as you want them, and sometimes they won't. But changing or pivoting, if you know in your heart as a parent that that's too much for her, it's not the right thing for them right now, listen to that. Because her burning out, her having a bad experience, her not wanting to be there or trying to do too much, ultimately you're going to pay the price. And again, if ultimately say, but then the coach isn't going to choose her. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And also, she may end up being a much better athlete, right? Because she's cross-training, she's doing all these different sports. She's less likely to get an overuse injury because there's a variety. She's not using the same ligaments and tendons in the same exact way over and over and over 365 days a year, right? So there's that piece too, particularly if you have a kid who's pretty athletic. At the end of the day, the coach is going to take the kids who can play, right? And so just keep that in mind too, that overall balance.
to what end? I mean, I have a junior son who's played 6 or 7 years of club, and he's played before that, loved playing a variety of sports. At the end, what is the goal? So most of us is recruiting, right? So we're at the point where you're sending emails to coaches and a little highlight video. And he happens to be on a really good team. So there's coaches on his court, and of course you pick all the hot, tall guys first. And so slaving, stressing, all these years, looking back, it's really reaching out to the coach and showing them your highlight reel. If you can't, if they don't come to your court to see you, or maybe they have seen you, you could have probably only done high school with some privates, or with friends and or family who plays, and still achieve the same goal without all of the stress. So I guess my question is, looking back again, to each his own, and having some sort of multi-sport, the kids happy and doing well in academics. At the end of the day, I don't know how it is for girls, but how is the recruiting process? Do you have to play club? Do you have to do high school? Can you do one or the other? Can you do some? We have a friend who chose as a 17-year-old the last 2 years not to play club, and just playing high school. And he's taking privates, and he can afford that, and that's all great. And I'm not sure where he's at in the recruiting process, but ultimately you're sending a video, and I think that's the most effective way, whether you're seen or not. Correct? I mean, is that how it works?
Yeah. So the question is around recruiting and how do you get exposure and for your son's volleyball player. So it comes down to exposure and connections and having somebody who's going to vouch for him, not you, and himself, promoting himself. Some boys don't like to do that at all. I had 2 of them. So if you have a kid who's not self-promoting, then to have somebody who's in your corner, a club coach, a high school coach, and your question around, do you have to play club? Do you have to, no, like it depends, but you need film and you need exposure. And then you need people who, usually, and anymore in this world, I mean, even in this book tour, I'm getting speaking gigs wherever I know somebody who knows somebody, right? Like that's how the world works. You send your email and one college coach, he said, I get 1,000 emails a day. Which one am I going to open? The one that I know somebody, right? Like, so you're, if you're in an echo chamber, if you're only just emailing and thinking you're going to get a response, it's finding somebody who can advocate for him. Hey, I know this coach, and assessing what level you're at. So making sure you're emailing the right level of coaches, making sure you're not, trying to go to the number one if you're really more of a D2, D3 player, or so it's, yes, the top 100 will find a home. But everybody else, it's really about, and both of my sons, neither of them were recruited out of high school. So it didn't happen till after. And that was exposure that they ended up doing a gap year and spending the time, and so that they could have the and I think for boys, it's an amazing experience to have that extra year of growth and development and everything. But there isn't a perfect formula, and everybody's recruiting trip is different. So don't, just because he's getting recruited doesn't mean, I know there's parents that are like, well, he plays with him and he's getting the offer from Kansas. Why aren't we getting an offer from Kansas? Doesn't work that way.
I know there are so many more questions. I also want to be respectful of Zibby's Bookshop, and they need to open to the public. We're here. We're happy to take more questions, but and there are books to buy. We're not going anywhere. Just but thank you so much, everyone, for being here, and thank you, Samantha. That's a good group.